Hello everybody. Welcome back to another Deja Vu video. We're going back again to combining like terms. We're going to be reviewing the process of doing this, but this time we're using rational numbers. We're using fractions and decimals instead of just integers. Now I noticed on our last test that this was an area a lot of us could use some practice. There's a few parts of the steps, or excuse me, a few steps in the process that we seem to be missing and skipping, and it's causing a lot of us to make mistakes that we don't need to make. So we're going to go through this step by step one more time, try a couple practice problems. Again, this time the only difference is I'm using fractions. Back to these fractions, guys, again, it's just a number. This 1/3 x just means that I have 1/3 of x's. It's just like saying I have 3 x's or 25 x's or negative 7 x's. I have 1/3 x's. And I'm going to add 3 2/5, and I'm going to subtract 5/2, and then I'm going to add a negative 4/5 here. A couple of things here that I want to add to make sure really that everyone's watching the video like they should be. This problem here, we left something out. We've got a 1/3 x here and plus 3 2/5 minus 5/2. I want this 5/2 to be minus 5/2 x. So I want you to go ahead and write that in. Minus 5/2 x plus a negative 4/5. So hopefully you're watching the video, paying enough attention that your example makes sense. And then example 2, 1.35y minus 2.75 minus 6.75 y's plus 5.2. Again, we don't just have one y, we have 1.35 y's. It's just a number in front of our variable. All right, it's just a number. The calculator is going to do most of the math for us, so even that part we're not too worried about today. So going back to the steps, what people are missing when they're trying to do this on their practice, on their quizzes, on their tests. Step 1, we just want to make sure that there's no groups left in the expression. Before we can combine like terms, we have to make sure that there's no more groups that we need to distribute and get rid of left in the expression. So up here, even though I have this set of parentheses, the only thing inside of it is my fraction negative 4/5. So that's not really a group. That's just a number, and the parentheses are telling me that it's a negative number. Okay, so step 2, we're going to somehow mark each set of terms. Remember, we did circles or boxes or triangles, so we can either circle them, we can put a square around them, we can put a triangle around them, we can double underline them, however you want. I like the shapes that go around them best because we're not just circling each number, we're circling each term, which means we need to circle each set of terms, which is going to be the number. We're going to circle each number and the sign and or variable attached to it. So we're going to somehow highlight each set of terms. So we're going to highlight the number, sign, and variable together. Again, we've practiced this a lot, but looking back at your test, at your quizzes, for some reason this step, a lot of you are doing incorrectly. So looking at example 1, my first set of terms are anything that includes an x in it. So I'm going to circle this 1/3 x. My next term is plus 3 2/5. That doesn't have an x in it, so I'm not going to circle it. I'm going to move on. This one is a minus 5/2 x. Now, not only do I want to circle the x, not only do I want to circle the 5/2, I have to remember to circle this negative sign in front. I don't want to leave that out, so I'm going to circle this entire term. And then my last one, negative 4/5. There's no x attached to it, so I don't want to circle it. So let's go back, and now our next term is just a constant because it doesn't have a variable, and I'm going to put a square around it. So it's not just the 3 2/5. I want to make sure I include that plus sign. And when I move to the back, here's another term without a variable. So that can go with this one. So I'm going to put a square around my plus negative 4/5. I want a square in that entire thing. So nothing in this problem is left out. All right? And the other common mistake I saw was people circling the operation after my variable. So for example, on here, on number 2, some people, instead of 1.35y, they were circling 1.35y and then the minus sign after it. That has nothing to do with this number. That has to do with the next number. So we want to circle everything that's in front of it. So I'm going to circle my 1.35y. There's no y's here, but I do have y's with this 6.75, and I also have a negative in front of it, a minus sign. So I'm going to circle that entire thing. Those are all my y's, so now I'm going to box in my constants. I have a negative 2.75, a minus 2.75, and then I have a plus 5.2. So I'm going to make sure, looking at this problem, that I didn't miss anything. This is all circled or boxed. There's no signs or anything left out here, nothing left out here or here. So I've circled, boxed everything in the problem. And now I'm going to move on to step number 3. Step number 3 says to add like terms together. We're going to add like terms together, or in other words, the terms that have the same variable or shape. How did we highlight them? All right, so terms that have the same variable, which means that they're going to be circled together, or they're going to be boxed or triangled or somehow marked. Okay, so going back to my example 1, 1/3 x, I'm going to look for anything else with an x in it or anything else that's circled, which is my minus 5/2 x right here. So I need to put those two together. So the first thing I have is 1/3 x's, which is positive. So in my calculator, I'm going to put 1/3. And if you notice down here in the notes, it says they're just numbers, so use your calculator. This 1/3, it's just a number. Use your calculator to do the math. Okay, so 1/3, and I'm going to minus 5/2. So my 1/3 minus 5/2, because that's what the problem tells me to do. And when I hit enter, it tells me a negative 13/6. So I have negative 13/6, and those are x's. Those are x's. I have negative 13/6 x. And step 4 right here that we haven't quite got to yet is just a reminder to put an addition sign between each combination. So after my negative 13/6 x's, I'm going to put a plus sign. And now I'm going to add together my next set of like terms. I have a positive, a plus 3 2/5. So I have a 3 2/5. And then it says to add negative 4/5. So I do plus negative 4/5. And my picture looks like I want it to. So when I hit enter, I get 13/5. So negative 13/6 x's plus 13/5. Now let's move over here to the decimals. Not quite as intimidating as the fractions are. For some reason, decimals don't make you quite as nervous as fractions. So we've got 1.35 y's and negative 6.75 y's. So 1.35, and here I have, these are positives, and this one says to minus 6.7 y's. So I'm going to minus 6.75, and those are my y's. It says I have a negative 5.4 y's. Then step 4 says to put a plus. Now I've got negative 2.75 plus 5.2. So negative 2.75 plus 5.2. Enter. Positive 2.45. So I have my y's, I have my constants, and even though they have decimals, I'm okay with that. Even though these are fractions, I'm okay with that. They're just numbers. And so we're going to move on to our try-togethers. If you have any problems with these decimals, with the addition and subtraction, what's usually going to get you is forgetting when you combine the 1.35 and this minus 6.75. I've seen you people do some weird stuff. I've seen people do 1.35 minus a negative 6.75. I don't know about you, but I only see one minus sign right here. I've also seen some of you do negative 1.35 plus 6.75. I can't just switch this negative around. This negative goes with my 6.75. It has to stay there. Okay? So moving down to these try-togethers. I got 6/13 B's minus 3/11 B's. So I'm going to make sure there's no groups. There's no groups. I'm going to circle everything with a B in it. So I've got 6/13 of them, and then I have negative 3/11 B's. Now, add like terms. These both have B's. They're both circled. So let's go ahead and do 6/13 of them minus 3/11 of them. And that tells me I have 27 over 143 B's. That's a weird, ugly fraction. I'm okay with that. I've got 27 parts of 143 whole B's. So that's not very much. That's a really, really small fraction. That's about 1/6 of a B. That's a small fraction. So moving on to number 2. No groups. That's step 1. Step 2 is to circle things that are the same. So I've got A's. So I'm going to circle 7.3A. No A's here, but I've got a minus 12.6 A's at the end. And now my constant here in the middle, I'm just going to put a box around it because I don't want to forget that plus sign. So let's combine them. 7.3 minus 12.6. 7.3 minus 12.6. I know to do 7.3 positive because there's not a negative sign in front of it. And I know to minus 12.6 because that's what's circled. That's what it tells me to do. Enter, and I get negative 5.3 A's. And then I put a plus sign because I always put a plus. And here I don't have to do any math at all because all that's left is 3.956. And I'm done with number 2. Okay, number 3, no groups. Step 1 is done. Step 2, circle anything that's the same. I've got 1 8/9 W's right here. I've got plus 3 W's right here. Now these are a little bit different. There's V's in them. So I'm going to put a box around the ones with a V. And now I can go ahead and add 1 8/9 W's plus 3 W's. That one I can do, I feel comfortable doing in my head because I just have 1 plus 3, which is 4, and then I still have 8/9. So 4 8/9 W's plus, there's only one set of V's, so 9/2 V's. And I'm going to move on. Number 4, again, making sure that you're paying attention to the video. I've got a Q right here. I want you to add another Q right here to your negative 19.17. Those are going to be Q's. All right, so let's go ahead. There's no groups. Let's circle everything with a Q in it. And then I have a plus 32.7 and a plus 3 right there at the end. So negative 5.96, negative 5.96. And it tells me that I need to minus 19.17 more Q's. So minus 19.17 more. And that tells me I have negative 25.13 Q's. Plus 32.7 plus 3. Well, that's just 35.7. That's one I can do in my head as well. So negative 25.13 Q plus 35.7. Hopefully you're getting a little bit more comfortable with fractions and decimals at this point because they're not going away. They're going to be here all year long and all the math that we do the rest of the year. So nothing to be nervous about. They're just numbers. As you're trying the pause and try problems over here, remember this negative 6 over 13, that's just the number of B's that we have. And then we're going to subtract 3/11 B's. Those are just two numbers, like if we had negative 6 minus 3. Okay? Last part to make sure that you're paying attention to the video. Down here in number 4, negative 5.6 Q's plus 2.7 Q's. We're going to add a Q right there with 2.7, and then we're going to subtract 1.17 minus 3.6. So give the video a pause, try those problems on your own, bring it back to me when you're done. We'll double check, make sure that you're doing your math correctly, and then we'll set you out to practice.